need to come clean about something. Back in January, I recorded an entire video trashing the Aurora Gold Standard rework. I sat down, wrote the script, even recorded the voiceover, the whole thing, and then I never posted it because I took a break from the channel, and by the time I came back, the moment had passed, and it didn't feel like the type of video I wanted to make anymore. But I still have the audio, and I think it's only fair that you hear what I said back then before we look at all of the changes, because it gets you in my mindset when I look at the new ship. We've jokingly called it the Space Cockroach because the wings that make the ship distinctive and insect-inspired are still present, but of course completely useless. Cockpit struts became their own meme and an eyesore for the players that had to deal with them. It's got better textures, full components, and all the same problems it had before. My recommendation is to get yourself the Mustang, which, while also outdated, is cheap and just never look back. Yeah, that was me. And I meant every word of it at the time. The Aurora deserved that review, and the only reason it never went live is because I got burned out. Not because I changed my mind. I still hate the OG. If you've played Star Citizen, then you know the Aurora. Chances are you owned one long enough to realize you deserved better. For most of us, it was the first ship we ever flew in this game. And also, for most of us, it was the reason we learned what a CCU chain was. I think the biggest problem is the original Aurora was designed before Roberts Space Industries knew what Roberts Space Industries even was. The brand language didn't exist yet. The Aurora family of ships shared a logo with the Constellation and basically nothing else. No design DNA, no cohesive philosophy, just two ships that happened to have the same badge on them. Over the years, RSI figured it out. They found that Imperial wedge silhouette, the sleek, confident lines, the ships that look like they were designed by a corporation that takes itself seriously. The Zeus, the Polaris, the Scorpius, those ships make you feel something when you see them. The Aurora made you feel like you should have spent more money. And the worst part was the gameplay. When I recorded that review, the Aurora couldn't compete with the Mustang on cargo. 3 SCU versus 4, which sounds trivial until you realize that early game cargo missions are one of the only ways a new player makes guaranteed easy money. The bed was coffin-sized, and I meant that as a commentary on the ship's combat potential as much as the sleeping arrangements. In VR, it was claustrophobic enough when crawling into the bed that I had to take the headset off reflexively. The ship existed as a historical artifact that CIG had outgrown but couldn't get rid of because millions of accounts still have one as their only ship. CIG eventually stopped selling it as a starter because it was a terrible first impression. Think about that for a second. The ship that launched the Kickstarter, the ship that funded this game's existence, became such a liability that the company stopped putting it in front of new customers. That tells you everything about where the Aurora stands, and still stands in my opinion, because it's not going anywhere. Despite no longer being sold, they will remain in the game for anyone that has one today. So when CIG started teasing what we thought were pictures of the Aurora Mark II, I expected a texture pass and minor updates like the Hornet. If we were lucky, then maybe we'd get some new components bolted on. The gold standard treatment they've been giving older ships, functional but uninspired, the game development equivalent of repainting your house the same color without stripping the chipping old paint first because you're lazy. And I was kind of right. Ladies and gentlemen, meet the new Aurora Mark I, Special Edition. We're getting another original Aurora model that's been beefed up because of course CIG has never missed a chance to sell us something. No hate, it's how the game I love gets funded, but I like to point it out anyway. If you're a fan of the original, and despite my hate for it, I know they exist, that's the magnus opus for the ship, the best it will ever be. CIG could have probably rested on that, still moved a ton of those ships, and had a successful month revenue-wise, but then they went and did this. That sound you just heard was a million wallets emptying all at once. Finally, After only 13 years, the Aurora Mark II now looks like it belongs in the same fleet as the rest of the modern Roberts Space Industries ships. That's the highest compliment I can give a ship in Star Citizen because their modern design language is the very best in the game. And I'll fight anyone who disagrees. The variable geometry wings really stand out. They actually move now. They give the silhouette a completely different character depending on the flight mode. They make the ship look like it was designed by someone who cared about what it would look like as well as how it would fly. Design-wise, the Mark II asymmetrical wing shapes are heavily inspired by the Ornithopter from Dune. From the cockpit, you get the immediate feeling of being in an X-Wing, something the Scorpius already does, but with a $300 plus price point. Giving new players that familiar setting as their first impression really is a smart move, in my opinion at least. It's exactly what I would have done if I was directing the game's art direction. CIG's pulling all the psychological strings, and it totally works. There's no such thing as subtlety when you're doing that. I'm not complaining about it, of course, but you see it instantly, just like they intended you to. Add to that you'll need to lock your S-foils in attack position to fire as chef's kiss to Star Wars fans as well. Taking the best pieces from sci-fi while avoiding copyright landmines has been Star Citizen's MO for years. But there's a lot more going on here, and I want to talk about what this means beyond the ship looking better. It's also a much different take on a starter ship and might end up being the new blueprint for all ships going forward. Quick shout out to the Impound for sponsoring this video. If you're going to buy ships, and let's be honest, a lot of you are going to do it anyway, I want you to do it somewhere safe. The Impound is a trusted third-party store that carries every ship in the game. They don't sell credits, which matters a ton to me, or I wouldn't partner with them. And they're the safest and most reliable option I've found for picking up ships, upgrades, or starter packages outside of CIG's predatory fear of missing out marketing strategy. If the Mark II has you thinking about your fleet, I'll have their link in the description. Thanks to the Impound, and let's get back to it. I made a video about this less than 24 hours ago, but it's now my go-to recommendation for starter ships, unless you want to specialize. CIG pulled the Mustang Alpha from the store, and this is now the only $45 game package available, and then only because it's on sale as a war bond. Go check that out, because the game is getting more expensive, and there's a debate in the comments about if the game can justify it. Your point of view matters. When Squadron 42 launches and millions of people click through to the persistent universe, a huge percentage of them are going to be sitting in a starter ship. If that starter ship feels outdated, cramped, and disconnected from the rest of the game, which is exactly what the old Aurora was, those players form their opinion of Star Citizen in the first 10 minutes, and a lot of them never recover from a bad first impression, especially after flying a lot of the cooler ships in Squadron 42, which would feel incredibly far away. CIG figured this out late, but they still figured it out. The OG starters just weren't cutting it. The starter package lineup expanded, and now based on months of their sales data, it's contracted to what I'd say is the core experience. There were 12 starter packages before. 12. Overwhelming new players with choice isn't productive. Along with the Mustang being retired, the Aero package is gone, the Nomad is gone, and the Pisces is gone. It's much easier to pick a starter package now. Unless you're 100% sure you want to specialize in mining or salvage, this is the ship to get. Sorry, Drake Cutter fans, there's a new sheriff in town and the name's Modularity. We've seen modules, or been promised them before on a lot of ships, but only a handful actually have the functionality in the game. By adding it to this ship, the idea is the Aurora can fill multiple roles, becoming a jack of all trades when you need it, and that's pretty cool. You know, we can rent ships in the game, but you don't get to tinker with them. You can't change out their systems or take advantage of all the cool things that ship component crafting will eventually bring to the table. I'm a fan of giving players that kind of choice because I believe an attachment to something in the game world is what keeps a player logging in, be that their ships, their org mates, or eventually their player-crafted bases. That's the psychological side of game design that a lot of studios miss. Beyond impressions, the Aurora Mark II got the expected mega buff that tends to happen with new ships. It can be outfitted currently with either a cargo pod or a combat module, and that instantly makes it competitive. I'd even say maybe better than the other starter ships, like the always highly recommended Aegis Avenger Titan, but that's going to be subjective. The base ship has 4 size 2 guns, plus with the combat module installed, you get 8 extra missiles and an additional shield generator. I can't complain about that, it's decent for a first ship. It puts many of the other starter ships like the Pisces and certainly the Mustang Alpha to shame in terms of firepower and survivability. You're not going to survive attacking a hammerhead in an Aurora, but it has a lot more use for a variety of combat missions and bounties now. When you hit a wall with your skill level, or the missions overwhelm the ship's capabilities, then you'll upgrade to something else. That's the intended design for the game. There's a ship treadmill, so to speak. Equally important, and maybe more important, are the cargo changes. The base ship only holds 2 SCU, which is awful, and makes the cargo module a must-have in my opinion. You could get by without the combat module and still be successful, but trying to do any kind of cargo mission without the extra storage would be painful. That module adds 6 SCU, bringing your total to 8, which rivals all the other high-end starters like the Titan or the Crusader Intrepid. It can even carry a hover bike, something that previously only a few starter ships could do. Star Citizen has turned into a game that's played as much on the ground as in space, so having that mobility in both from a single ship at this price point is a big deal. The interior is way more spacious, which the current game absolutely needs. There's the added functionality that a lot of ships are still missing, like weapon and armor lockers. Much like the interior of the Intrepid, there's nothing starter feeling about it anymore. I'm not feeling nearly as claustrophobic in VR getting into the bed, but I don't want to give credit for that though. It should be the default, really. The screen above where your character lays down is a nice touch, and if one day that were to be functional, it would be even cooler. But despite my praise to this point, it's not perfect, and it should be a reviewer's job to be more than a cheerleader. Moving up to the cockpit, the MFDs are laid out well, but with only 2 MFDs, there's a lot of information that isn't available all the time. The Mustang Alpha, for comparison, had 4 MFDs, and that really helps in high-stress situations. I'd always like to have more given how much players need to manage in a ship now. It's a problem with a ton of ships, but given they had the opportunity to address it here and chose not to, is a little disappointing. There's one thing that bugs me though, and it's the cockpit struts. I stopped counting them when I got to 12. I get it. It feels like an X-wing with the 4 converging guns, and the struts give it a more structured cockpit feel, but thanks. I hate it, especially the completely unnecessary one right below your primary point of focus. What frustrated me to no end with early Star Citizen development was RSI initially making struts that annoyed players into a tongue-in-cheek feature of their design philosophy. We see it in the Constellation too, and it's still annoying there even though the Constellation had many reworks over the years. In a larger ship like the Zeus, you can get away with it more because of the seating position and the overall field of view from the pilot's seat, and they don't even have a horizontal strut in that ship's design. Clearly a lesson was learned there. But in a smaller ship, where you're tight against the glass, it becomes a real issue. Look at the Scorpius. There's no strut right in the middle of the view, despite it being the merge point on the glass panes. That's also an RSI ship, and they showed the willingness to improve the design away from struts to give players a better experience. Why they left it in here can only be chalked up to some misguided nostalgia for frustration. We'd be better off unburdened by what has been, or something like that. Okay. Come back to me, I can do better. It's hard to fault the ship beyond that. It does exactly what it should. Plus, if it was more powerful, it would invalidate many of the ships in the lineup. Future modularity intrigues me as well. With my theory crafting hat on, I could see additional larger-size cargo pods which might extend the usefulness, because the gap from starter to dedicated cargo ship is huge. Perhaps even a tiny mobile base you can deploy with living quarters. I'm not sure that they would give it mining or salvage, as that directly competes with the RSI Salvation, but anything's possible. I think the biggest problem is this still isn't going to be the starter ship for most existing players, and they'll be missing out on these improvements without paying for it. There are millions of accounts out there where the OG Aurora is the only ship. Backers who pledged years ago drifted away and are going to come back when Squadron 42 drops or when a friend tells them the game has gotten good. I'd have liked to see it as a free upgrade for anyone that has an MR already, but that was never going to happen. There's 1,000 developers' salaries to pay after all. When I made my ship guide for 2026, I told you to buy a Mustang and never look back. Well, you can't now. The Aurora Mark II is the ship CIG should have made 5 years ago, and I'm not going to hold the timing against them because the result is worth the wait. For the first time in my entire time playing Star Citizen, and as a first impression, I'm happy to have an Aurora in my hangar. And honestly, I'm as surprised by that as you are. The space cockroach grew up, and it looks damn good. If you're one of the millions of players with an Aurora collecting dust, you might want to consider melting it for this ship. And if you're a new player trying to decide between starters for the first time ever, I'm not going to tell you to skip the Aurora. That sentence feels strange coming out of my mouth. Take that for whatever it's worth. What do you think? Does the Mark II fix the ship, or is it too little too late? And be honest, How many of you still have an original Aurora sitting in your hangar that you haven't flown in years? Get in the comments. I promise you I read everyone. And get subscribed because we're building something here and I can't wait to see where we can take this. Thanks for watching and I'll see you in the verse.